If you have a sense of something is not right, believe it. Don't let it come to a point where it affects your health. It affected my health, not listening to myself. It affected my mindset, affected my well-being. And now I'm on that journey to come back to my health because for so long I didn't listen to myself. I
Yeah.
mean, I've taken one step towards what I consider my dream life. And I'm not daydreaming about that life anymore. I'm living it.
Welcome to the Holistic Career Change Podcast. Spoiler alert, we don't discuss conventional, linear, boring career change here. This is the place where we talk about finding an aligned career path that feels like an extension of who you are, where you get paid for being yourself. Forget personality quizzes, soul-crushing scrolling on job sites, and breaking your brain trying to find your why. Join me and many other career changers who've changed their career holistically by first defining who they are at their core and then using this blueprint to design a fulfilling career or business. We use the mind-body-soul approach, and we take into consideration the complexity and multidimensionality of all that you are and want to represent in the world. This is where purpose-led careers are born and built. I'm your host, Vilma Oseita. Let's go. Hello, gorgeous friends. How are you? I really hope you're feeling inspired, and I hope you're committed to taking these steps towards finding and then building an inspiring career path for yourself. I also hope, I know that if for some reason you're feeling fearful, uncertain about the future, today's episode will be exactly what the doctor ordered. I promise. I have such a special guest today, a client of mine whom I might have mentioned about on this podcast before, and who is a mind-blowing example of what it looks like to show up for this work with determination and consistent action in spite of fear and in spite of dysregulation. Nikita is in the process of switching from being a dentist to becoming an interior designer, which, by the way, I believe is just the beginning for her. Just as so many of the career changers that I work with, and actually those of you who are listening to this podcast, Nikita is a multifaceted, multi-passionate individual, and she has a lot of dreams and aspirations to not only build an authentic life and career for herself, but also to make an impact and leave a legacy behind. So if you identify with this description, this episode will be such a luxurious treat for you. Because one of the topics Nikita and I discuss in this conversation is how to prioritize all of these desires and wishes and plans, and how to be okay with choosing just one track to start with. Because I know this is something that a lot of you will struggle with and hold it against yourself and delay starting altogether. Nikita's switch is massive. Because it's not often we hear stories about doctors who decide to change paths and also opt for something creative. And I know that one of Nikita's goals is to be that example of what's possible. In spite of years and in spite of money spent studying and practicing this craft, you are allowed, just like Nikita gave herself permission, and in fact, you should change course if you are in a similar position that Nikita found herself in a year ago. Burnt out, experiencing episodes of depression, trying to distract and disconnect, using food, alcohol, and just living in this survival mode and complete chronic nervous system dysregulation. And while she openly admits, which one of the many things I love about her, that she's work in progress and she'll continue to be work in progress just like all of us, she shares how different her life looks like now as she's studying for an aligned career, as she's enjoying the process of studying, which is such a different experience than what she experienced when she was studying to become a dentist, and she's feeling the flow of life. She says she finally feels like she is home, something she struggled with, finding that feeling for the majority of her life because she was lost chasing the dreams and the goals that, as it turns out, weren't even hers. And that was also, and can be for many of us, a very painful realization. And there's a lot of grief associated with leaving that life behind, which she experienced as well. Um, Before recording the episode, Nikita and I had a little chat, and we decided to focus perhaps a little bit less on the circumstances of her journey. And if you have any questions, I'm sure she'll be happy to talk to you. I'm going to leave her details in the show notes. But what we wanted to highlight was all that she learned on her way from burnout, stuckness, to her enjoying her new life now, studying to become an interior designer. And if you've listened to other career changers share their journeys on this podcast, you've probably noticed a common thread with all of them. That is, embracing a purpose-led path is so much more than just updating your resume or becoming better in interviewing. It's about going through this mini inner revolution. It's peeling layers off of everything that is inauthentic within you. It's rewiring limiting beliefs. It's learning how to embody this new version of yourself, which at times can feel so incredibly scary, and we may feel so vulnerable doing that, right? And again, Nikita is just such a magical example of someone who was brave enough to say yes to herself and to become this conscious, intentional author of her life's work and her life story. I'm so thrilled and so honored to be sharing this transformation with you. Enjoy. Hello, Nikita. Welcome to the Holistic Career Change podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
Yes, my goodness. I don't even know where to start. Let's start with you introducing yourself. Just share whatever you want to share with the listeners.
Sounds good. Hi, everyone. I'm Nikita, and I am currently living, I'd say, the beginning of my dream life.
Yeah.
To go a little bit more into detail, I am in New York City going to design school, something that's been a dream of mine for, I'd say, 20 years. And we're just starting that process now.
Amazing. So talk to me a little bit. So you just moved, right? So you're kind of, we're starting to the listeners, I want to explain the way that we decided to talk about this. So we're starting from where she's now, right? To give you a little bit of a glimpse of the life that she's leading now, because that was a year of work, right?
Yeah.
And we will definitely go into the detail of that. Tell a little more about what school you go into. I know it's just the very beginning, but just to give the listeners a better taste of what you're going through right now.
Yes. So I just moved to New York City about, I'd say, a week and a half ago to attend the New York School of Interior Design. And I am living out of a hotel right now, and I'm trying to figure it out. But I am one of many career changers that have decided to go back to school for interior design, which has been a passion of mine for a very long time. So right now, my weeks are looking like up until yesterday, figuring out where I was going to live after this, but taking these great classes and just things that have always interested me and intrigued me. So that is what my day-to-day looks like right now. And it's a great spot to be in.
I saw a story today of you were doing, what were you, the sketching piece? What were you
The
doing?
drafting.
Yeah.
Yes.
Talk to me just a little bit, like, what is it like to study for something that you actually are interested in? Because that was not the case before.
Good question. I was actually thinking about this yesterday. What it feels like to study something that I actually am interested in. It kind of feels like time flies. And I noticed that yesterday. So this class I'm taking, it takes a lot of effort, and you have to be very dedicated and focused to it, because you're pretty much looking at the millimeters between lines, because that's what you have to do in interior design. And 8.5 hours passed without me even realizing it. So I was shocked, because I remember in my old life where I would be looking at the clock every 2 minutes, like, please God, get me out of this lecture. And my lectures were 2 to 3 hours long before. Now they're 3 to 4.5 hours long, and I am not looking at the clock. I am intrigued. I'm interested. I am tired. Let's be honest. It's a long time, but it's manageable.
What an amazing place.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So then let's talk about, so you and I met, it was exactly, I think, a year ago. I think you had scheduled a consultation like end of January, right? End of January, right?
Yes.
So let's paint the picture of what was going on in your life back then when we met.
Okay. So the first meeting I had with you, I actually canceled because my life was crazy. What was going on a year ago was that I was the owner of a dental clinic, an unhappy owner, and I had these pipe dreams of, me wanting to pursue design for the longest time. And I would go on these very high highs and these extreme low lows and constantly trying to pursue something without actually trying, if you know what I mean. It was always there that I wanted to do this, but I came to you, I think it was in that moment of like, hey, I think I know what I want to do. I want to do internships. I'll figure it out. And I didn't really understand where coaching would lead me, but I just knew that I was in this place that it was a dark place. I'm not going to lie. You're in a moment of, well, I was a dentist and, am I doing the right thing? Should I be changing? So I was in a very confusing spot and it was just not clear where I could go from here. So that's where I came to you, and it's been the best decision I've ever made.
Mm, right. So let's talk about you being a dentist. So basically,
Yes.
you went to school for dentistry, you chose
Yeah.
that, right? Talk to me,
Hmm.
give us a little bit of like details of that journey.
Okay, so that journey. So I'm going to be very honest with you. I decided to be a dentist out of a fluke. Honestly, I was in a I was one of those kids that I really studied very, very hard. And I was in this accelerated program. I was 16, 17, and I was in a program where everyone around me had already, they knew what they wanted. They wanted to go to Harvard. They wanted to go become doctors and engineers and lawyers. And I also had that pressure from my community. And so at 16, 17, I had a friend who's like, I'm going to go become a dentist and I'm going to apply to this program that will allow me to go into dental school. And I'm like, you know what? I don't know what I want to do with my life, but I want to do that. And at that time, I had this dream to become a designer, like I had mentioned before, but it just didn't feel within my reach. And so I really tucked it way, way back. So for me, I was like, I don't know what I want to do. So anyway, to make a very long story short, it was an accelerated program. I pretty much interviewed for dental school at the age of 16, 17. I think it was 17. I got in and that was my life. That was it. I was like, okay, I'm going to become a dentist. And the reason I chose it was, for those who love dentistry, it can offer a great lifestyle. It can offer, so much. And I thought, yeah, I maybe want to have a family. I want to do this. I want to have money. And so it was a flexible choice. And I was lucky enough to have the grades and the resume to get in. And I pursued that all the way through, even though sometimes in my head, the little whispers started like, are you sure? Are you sure? And I would ignore them. So I went through dental school. It was not how I feel now, going to school. It was very hard. It was, of course, it was hard, but it just was draining. And I just remember always being drained. Regardless, I then decided to go into residency, and I was lucky enough to get into a top residency program in the States. And so I was like, okay, this is great. But what really got me was that after a full 12-hour day, you're seeing patients, you're doing all these really cool procedures. I went home wanting to never think about dentistry again. And my peers went home studying dentistry. They're like, we want to learn better techniques and how to do this. And I was like, absolutely not. I don't even want to think about this. And that to me was the first time I noticed that I was different. And I looked around, and I'm like, I'm not doing what they're doing. Like, this is weird. And at the same time, my husband, who's my then fiance, reminded me, he's like, you were not yourself. You were constantly, just drained and angry, and he used other words which I'm not going to mention, but he was just like, you were just not yourself. And so anyway, that continued on, and I moved to Canada for him. He's Canadian, and I went into a corporate job, which was a great job, really, for anyone who loves dentistry. And I hated every minute of it. I remember within the first couple months, I was like writing in my journal, like, please get me out of this. I don't like this. I need to quit. And, at the time, my spirituality was really starting. So I was like, universe, please just give me some signs to get out of here. Like, something is wrong. And I'd come home every night crying. And that's not who I am. I was miserable. Like, there's times where my husband had to pick me up from the floor because I was so miserable. And I just thought that was normal. And I would look around and I'm like, well, no one else is talking about being unhappy in their jobs. And I should just stop because I work so hard. I, I'm in this great position that I'm a doctor. Like, and I'm a woman of color. Like, this is something that I should be happy. And I wasn't. And it was showing in my marriage, it was showing in who I was. So anyway, I luckily I was gonna quit, but they fired me.
Oh, I
Even though
didn't know that. You guys, I'm hearing this for the first time. I'm like,
yes, they fired me. And you know why? Is because, well, not that I did anything wrong, but there was some issue with payment and I asked them about it. And instead of paying me, they fired me. And I thought that was the funniest thing because that day I was going to go up to them and quit. And it was like, universe was just like, honey, you have waited too long. We're going to push you out. I spent
it
the next
happens
2 years.
so much. I love that you're
It's
saying that because it's so
crazy.
common. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's so crazy. And that was one of the turning points. I spent the next 2 years, like I didn't work for maybe about a year and a half because I was like, oh, I need to go on my soul searching journey, which was me on the couch watching Oprah videos.
Yeah.
And like which was hoping that something would happen. Like, please just give me an answer. Like, what is my
Yeah.
purpose? And I remember Googling, like, what's my purpose? How do I figure it out? And like, I was going through that initial phases of where do I go from here? And so my family was worried about me. They're like, why don't you just, get a job for a little bit? And obviously I'm just sitting at home. It's not healthy. So somehow we got to a point where I was like, you know what? I'm going to buy a business. Maybe me buying a dental clinic will allow me to be an entrepreneur and that will fulfill it for me. And I'll just do it in dentistry. Well, universe had other plans. So I did purchase the practice, but I would say everything that could have gone wrong went wrong. And I don't say that lightly because a lot of my advisors told me that there was a series of events that had happened. And my advisors told me that you've been through more in literally a year than most of my clients have been through in 15 years of business.
Mm.
So if that wasn't a sign, I don't know what was. And what I also remember as I recall back is as I had signed the paperwork, I had this voice and feeling that I did the wrong thing. Like I should not have pursued this practice.
You mean when you were signing like the
When I
purchasing?
was signing the documents, I remember being obviously you're on a high. Then oh my god, I purchased the practice, and but it's like okay, there's something's off, something's off, and I knew that the time I signed it and the day I walked in, the next day I was like, I saw my pictures from that day and I could see it. I knew it, and I could see it in my eyes. I had done the wrong thing, so I was thinking, why did I do this? What led me to here? And to me, it was a lot of pressure because I was in that spot of like just this gray spot. I didn't have you, Velma. And so I
Yeah.
was trying to figure out on my own, like, okay, what do I do? I'm unhappy. Is this normal? Is this abnormal? So that journey took me up till last year when I came to you. And I just knew that, I was in this clinic. I had a great team, which was awesome, but it wasn't, I was always in survival mode and I was so drained. And I actually wrote this morning where I lived my weeks for my weekends and I lived my weekends dreading my weeks. And
Yeah.
I did that day in and day out from, I'd say, during residency, but really during the last 3 years of owning that clinic, which I'm thankful, we can go more into it after, but it was, it could have been more successful. It could have been more whatever, but I did the best I absolutely could. And I killed myself in the
Oh
process.
my goodness. Yeah. Because you came in like really burnt out. Like you said, your nervous system was
Hmm.
activated all the time. Like you were
Yeah,
like literally just fight or flight state, right?
constantly,
I know
constantly.
that you were doing a lot of soothing, which is very normal. And that's what you and I spoke about at the beginning. Is
Hmm.
like when you're activated, it's normal for you to want to binge watch things, to snack, right? To maybe have a
Always,
drink, right? You need
always.
your system is trying to look for some sort of relief. And
Hmm.
so, and you, when you and I was speaking, right, about where you're, because you were down at yourself, where you're like, I should have made it more successful. I could have, but
Yes,
when we're in misaligned positions, it's very hard. You literally need to like sacrifice your life force to
yes.
make something successful. And that's where you were living. And I was thinking about it because I was laughing before the recording because it felt like there was a coaching relationship, like we have a coaching
Yes.
relationship, but in our coaching relationship there was three of us, is you, me, and the clinic, because it was it was like the third
Always,
entity.
always.
right? It was
Always
so massive and so big for the majority part of even last
of my
year, right?
yeah.
Until you sold. And it would always be just us talking about how you could take care of yourself more. And you would just tell me, like, Vilma, I don't know
Mhm.
what happens. Like the minute I enter it, even the minute I get
Mhm.
into my car, my energy leaves me. Talk to me about that. What did it feel like?
Yes. It was even when I was putting my makeup on. It was the night before when my head even hit the pillow. I was like, "Oh my God, I have to go to the clinic tomorrow. Oh my God." And so what we did when I started working with you is that I was going in every single day and I really, as an owner, I wasn't actually practicing chairside. And so that was one of the greatest blessings for me, not practicing chairside because I don't know that I'd even be able to be here at this point. But we
Mm.
had organized my days so that I'd be going there at least just 2 times a week and really start to set those boundaries. But what would happen between those 2 days? So I went a Tuesday and a Thursday on that Wednesday, on that Monday, and even after, thinking about the clinic, every time I'd get a message from my manager saying this happened or that happened or whatever, my nervous system, it felt like there was a war being waged on my body. Like it was constant. And even thinking about going to work, it started, you know what, to be honest with you, it started actually the morning before. I would find myself, now that I'm thinking about it, I just find myself in this chaotic situation, just trying to self soothe before I even went to the clinic. And I'd be putting my makeup on in the morning and I'm like, oh my God, I don't want to go. I don't want to go. And like that, I could feel that in my body. And now that I say that, like it's actually, it can make me a little bit emotional because it's like I put myself through that for so long.
Yeah.
And putting my makeup on, driving to work, I'm turning on the street and I feel like I'm throwing up. Like I can't even eat, I can't think. I'm like, I can't believe I have to do this. And something happened when I walked through the doors, and all of a sudden, it's almost like an auto, like a veil went over me, like I had mentioned. And those feelings of not wanting to be there, they kind of got covered by this veil because I was playing a role, right? I was playing a role in that. And that's another thing I realized about my life is how many roles I've been playing. But in that specific moment, I was a clinic owner and I was the boss and I showed up that way, but it took every ounce of me to do that. So when I came home, I couldn't enjoy my husband. I was not present. And I realized I hadn't been present for most of my life. And that was another huge takeaway from our coaching like the last years. I did not know, I didn't make memories. Like I don't remember being in my 20s and I don't remember all these different things, but that was really heightened when I had my clinic.
Mm, yeah, because this is so true, and I'm sure that a lot of people can relate when you're in misaligned places.
Mhm.
And also, you were very much when you would go in, so you would play that role, but it was also autopilot, right? When I would ask you
Autopilot.
what
Yes.
happened at that point, and you were like, I don't know. And
Yes.
we try different techniques. Can you like set a reminder on
Mhm.
your phone to check in with yourself? Because we need to start decreasing this time you spend in autopilot.
Exactly.
Right? Because if you're on autopilot, you can't change anything. You can't set
Mhm.
healthy boundaries. You're just kind of there reacting, right?
Yes.
And completely disconnecting from your truth, from your soul, from everything is like
Exactly.
just autopilot galore. And one thing that we remember to that I remembered this morning as well. Do you remember how you and I were you were convinced and other people that it was haunted? Like you went through such a journey. How at one
Yes.
point you even thought like a clinic was haunted because there
It was
wasn't even
haunted,
something wrong.
Velma. It was. It was. Okay, so I mean, this is such a side note, but one of the owners from 40 plus years ago had committed suicide in there. And I
Oh my
swear to
goodness.
you, believe in ghosts or not, I saw a shadow when I was renovating this clinic, which is another thing we got to do together was still be able to pursue design. But I was painting and I look over and I see something. So I'm like, literally every sign is like telling me, get the hell out of there, get out. And like for me, I think just the way I learn, like I need to be knocked over the head with a brick for me to see something. So one of the takeaways for sure was like start to listen at
Yeah.
the whispers because I mean, we should do another podcast just on the clinic. I'm talking like
Yeah.
I had just purchased it before the pandemic. I lost 500 patients because someone solicited. I lost a bunch of my team members. I had XYZ and just, it was piling on. It just was not smooth. It was like there were stop signs at every single time. Every time I walked into the clinic, there was
Yeah.
another stop sign, like stop and turn around, woman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%. I, I mean, it was hard. It was hard. It was like a tough journey. And one of the questions that sometimes you would come into sessions and you would ask me, right? Like with a lot of desperation, because
Yeah.
there was that cognitive side of you was like, Vilma, I am trying to get out. I'm trying to sell. I need
Yeah.
to like prepare the clinic for sale because I know I want to leave, right?
Yeah.
Especially when you would get those glimpses of what it's like to be in design world. And we'll talk
Yes.
about it, how you were trying it out. You would come back and you're like, oh my God, I remember who I am. I remember like I
Yes.
felt it. I was alive when I was in a whatever show or shadowing someone, right? And then
Yes.
you come back and the veil would be back on and you're like, who am I kidding? This is never going to work,
It
right?
was struggle.
And you would ask me, but Vilma, why is it that like why I can't leave? It seems like I can't leave. Like I'm putting in
Yeah.
so much effort, but like something is against me. And you and I, we spoke a lot about how we live in a mirror construct. A lot of the times when we're in certain environments, especially the ones that we have
Mhm.
outgrown, it's not just about tangible financial lessons or like I learned how to run a business, but a
Yeah.
lot of it is also just us being mirrored back certain patterns that we'll live in
Mhm.
to help us solve it and do something differently. And you and I spoke how the clinic became almost like a representation of certain patterns in your life that you had been living
Mhm.
in, from just the way you ran it to the
Mhm.
relationships you had with people, right? And it wasn't essentially a healer, it was healing you, but like because you're in so
What?
much pain, it was hard to admit it or see it. Can you share
Mhm.
more about that?
Yes. What I realized in the clinic was that I was playing this role of always being a fixer and really being the person that people came to just to, I guess, fix things. And so I realized that I was playing that role there, but I was also playing that role in so many different areas of my life. And I also started to realize that I allowed my life to be dictated by other people. I had this lack of boundaries, and that was mirrored not just in the clinic, but it was also mirrored in my relationships with so many different people in my life. And just the way I lived my life was I allowed the circumstances to dictate me. And so, really, we were tested. I was really tested during the sale process because honestly, if I really wanted to, I could have probably sold this clinic a, a year into it, right? Or 6 months into it. But it took almost 2 extra years to sell it. And I think the reason really was that it was that healer and that teacher of learning to let go and to start to believe in myself and trust myself. And I remember how many times I came to you, Vilma, this buyer fell through and this happened and that, like the selling process was very difficult and it was harder than most. Another difficult part, but it was harder than most other people just because I had those extra lessons to learn where it really brought me back to myself. But I was constantly in survival mode, and it showed me where I was in survival mode in so many different areas of my life as well. And to learn to step out of that and not allow, like I said, those circumstances to dictate my life, because that's how I was living for so long, where say an employee quit or whatever happened, that all of a sudden my entire week would be derailed. And so I learned to start to regulate myself in those moments. And I was able to then pick up the tools that you had taught me, the thought downloads and the modeling. And I was able to use that a little bit better. But again, it was almost like a brick had to be hit over my head for me to really start to see what position I had put myself in and to say, yes, this is my responsibility. I put myself in this position. The circumstances were, of course, they're always going to be there, but it doesn't dictate, your sense of self. So I
Yeah.
learned to go back to myself and be like, who am I? What is it that I want? Even if I'm in this tough situation, how am I going to show up and know and believe that there is another life out there waiting for me?
Yeah. Totally. And I think the first step for you was, like you said, to get that awareness. Like awareness is the first step.
Mhm.
Because even when at the beginning I would try to reflect that back to you, we're like, yeah, but like at the beginning, like, but the
Mhm.
situation was really serious, right? And then you
Yeah,
and I were not laughing now when you said, like, do you remember when I would come and say, Vilma, but like next week is going to be better. Like I just need
yeah.
to take care of this issue. And then next week I'll have
It was
so much
always
more
next
time.
week.
Right. And I was
Yeah.
like, are you noticing at one point I said, are you noticing how much you're using that? You are feeding yourself lies that
Yes.
you just need to like work hard now or like take care of this,
Yeah.
and then you can like focus on what you need to focus. But there was a little bit of that addiction to chaos,
Yes.
right?
It was my narrative as well. I
Yeah.
mean, that narrative that I had that, oh, it's going to get better next week. And that it just showed me that my narrative in so many different areas of my life, it was just so, because I had thoughts unexamined for so long, those thoughts. So even with the clinic and within, my relationships or whatever, those thoughts were such a strong narrative. And I was living that out no matter what. So no matter every time we try to work on it, it wasn't until I really sat down examine my thoughts over and over and over again. I was like, oh, okay. Like for instance, that narrative, I have that addiction to chaos. Like for me, my brain for some reason feels safe in chaos. And I was creating that
Yeah.
in the clinic by being extra available to people. So then they had the permission to then,
Yeah.
permeate those boundaries and then affect my day. So I
Yeah.
saw how there was a cause and effect for everything, but it began with me.
Yeah. And I love that. I remember this specifically because you would tell me about like, Vilma, I
Mhm.
cannot get a break when I'm at the clinic because people come at me. And I
Mhm.
was like, well, did you make space for them to come at you? Because if you set the boundaries and you
Mhm.
came into work and you would very clearly show them or communicate that you're
Yeah.
not available, they wouldn't. But because you had the tendency to be, like you said, the fixer, the people pleaser, right? You wanted to be needed and in the chaos,
Yeah.
right? Because then at least you would be running on adrenaline, right? And not having to be in the low energy of like really feeling the misalignment
Yeah.
and the pain of being in there.
Exactly. And I don't know where, and it's so funny you say like people pleasing now. And at the time I was like, no, I refuse to be people pleaser. I don't care
Yeah.
about other
Well, you're
people.
an
But
Aries, right? So
I,
you're like, we don't people
Right?
please.
But I was realizing that I was living out that role without even understanding it,
Yeah.
because to be needed made me actually feel like I had purpose being there, because I was so unhappy and I didn't at the time know how to look within myself to find a purpose. So I created a reason for people to come to me, which then gave me the feeling of purpose. And I realized that that's something now I'm very aware of, to make sure, how am I showing up? What is my role? How do I want to be in this moment? And
Yeah.
I'm more aware of it now, but I wasn't aware of it at
Mm.
all before.
This is so creative, the way we just try to find some sort of meaning in what we're doing, even
Yeah,
in the darkest of places. And it seems like that's how you learned how
exactly.
to do it, even if there was a very high cost of you just
Yeah,
draining yourself out of it.
exactly. And I think it's that feeling of belonging that I was going after, because like I
Mm.
mentioned to you, I went to school away from my family when I was 18. I moved to Canada. Like I've done a lot, and I think that that need to that belonging was so strong that that's, I think, more so what propelled that feeling of, okay, well, come to me, let me fix this for you, or if something's not happening, let me help you with it. So it was definitely what I needed to look in, like, inner child wound is something that I needed to start looking into.
Yeah, 100%. This is so powerful what you said. I think a lot of people can resonate with that. Okay, so I think what would be good to maybe spend some time on just kind of going into detail on all the things that you realized that you learned that really helped you
Mhm.
on this journey and helped you to go back to like yourself and who you are.
Yeah.
And maybe let's talk about something that sounds a lot of the times really boring for people, but like self-care. Can we start about
Oh
self-care?
my God.
Because
Let's
that was
talk
usually
about self-care.
because that is like the first thing that I talk, like literally that was my first session where I asked people about self-care and start asking them to introduce practices, right?
Yeah,
And you were like really polite at the beginning. You're like, yeah, I know, I get it, but like you didn't fully
I did.
manage to show up for it at the beginning.
Oh my God. Okay, guys, if you're not doing self-care, please do it now. Um, okay, so what I realized, and this is someone like, I was very black and white on self-care. I was like, oh, okay, go to the spa, like, okay, take a bath. But really, really, what I realized is without self-care, you don't have the health to actually have the mindset to then pursue what you want to pursue.
Yes.
That's how strong it became for me, because if I didn't take care of myself, so, when you're an autopilot and you're dysregulated, for me, what that looks like is I'm drinking coffee, I'm sleeping late, I'm having alcohol, I'm having all the foods that don't feel good to me, so gluten and this and that. But what would happen with that was that my brain would not be clear enough to then recognize the mindset I had at the moment. So if I had these thoughts that were running around everywhere in my head, and you so affectionately call them gremlins, these gremlins is almost like me not taking care of myself fed these gremlins, which made it harder for me to actually make a change in my life and stick to that change. So something as simple as, I realized that for me, coffee is not good for me. And so by having a cup of coffee in the morning, it could be anything for anybody else, but for me, it was these specific things. Not having coffee and then not sleeping. My brain was so fuzzy when I woke up that I could not actually come to session and be like, I felt like I 100% put my effort into the work that we were supposed to do. So it just made it harder and longer to actually make that change, I think. Had I been self care, had I been stabilized, I would be able to feel more of what it is that my body was trying to tell me and actually trust that instead of constantly ignoring it and ignoring it and ignoring it. So that's really where I learned the relationship of health and body to actually move your life forward. So I'm going to talk about that's one of the first things I learned. And I'm not going to lie, it's been a journey because there are times where I'm like really good. I'll give myself an A plus, like, yes, I'm doing all the things. And then something will derail my routine. And for instance, right now I've moved to New York. I'm living out of a hotel, which means I can't cook. If I'm having a little bit of coffee to get my sleep and stuff kind of going, um, I'm realizing how it's affecting me. So it hasn't been a clean, linear, hey, yeah, I'm like super into self-care. It's been definitely, I'd say, like a journey. There's some days where I'm better than others. If I get my meditation and I can see how I can think clear, some days I don't. But now it's just understanding that as long as I find a way to take care of myself and regulate myself first before, say, checking Instagram in the morning or checking the news, I'm able to then set a really good, I'd say, foundation for the rest of my day. And if the rest of my day doesn't go smoothly, I'm able to then reflect at night and be like, okay, well, what could I have done better? And not being so hard on myself. Because that's one thing I think I came in, I've always been so hard on myself. Extra pressure, I put it on myself. I don't know where that comes from, but it's something that I noticed that I need to take care of myself first.
Yeah. And that pressure, that extra pressure, that like black or white thinking, like a lot of us
Hmm.
have, a lot of the times as trauma respond or like coming from that, like right or wrong way of doing things. And
Hmm.
if I'm already doing things wrong, I might as well just quit and not even try
Forget it.
anymore. So yeah,
Exactly.
forget it. And I think for you was a big journey of like just self-acceptance, right? Like through
Hmm.
self-awareness, learning how to self-accept. And now you know that it's not really about staying on track all the time and being perfect, but it's about when you fall
Exactly.
off, getting back to it with love,
Back on.
right?
Exactly. Exactly. And I also, one of the other things I learned was that the way my brain is, it's not linear. It's not something that I used to be so hard on myself because I was always struggling with deadlines, procrastination, um, not following through, not finishing a task, having a lot of open-ended things in my projects. And I was always so hard on myself. But when I started to look at the way my brain functions, it's not linear. So now I have to take care of it and work with my brain
Yeah.
the way that it actually wants to function and feed it properly, give it the right vitamins to be able to show up in a way that allows me to be creative and effective. So that was another big learning lesson for me.
Yeah. Like again, so like I said, like
Mhm.
learning to work with your system versus against it, right? And like
Against it.
and then we talked a little bit about ADHD, right? And you learning you had
Mhm.
ADHD and you went on the whole discovery. And then I remember you came
Yeah.
on one session and were like, oh my God, it makes sense why I operate the way that I do.
Yes.
Why am I like so upset with myself? This is just, and I call it the
It's the way I
superpower because I
am.
believe it's a superpower.
Yeah. And that's what I mean when I say my non-linear brain. Because for me, like, I don't want to sit there and be like, well, I have ADHD. For me, it's not something that's conducive to what I feel. So for me, I
Yeah.
call it my non-linear brain. It's
Yeah.
just very different, and it's fine. Like, there's so many of us who have it,
Yeah.
but you helping me see that that's how my brain functioned was a game changer for me.
Mm.
Nobody else has ever, anyone else has never told me that, okay, this is what's going on with you. And I never knew to even look into it. So
Yeah.
when you started seeing my patterns and then I started to learn about it, I'm like, oh, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So it was a game changer for me as well.
I love that. And
Yeah.
like I said, a lot of people are out there who have nonlinear brains, right? More and more, especially people
Mhm.
I'm noticing in the creative fields, they are so much better with connecting the dots and coming
Yeah.
up with something that is new or innovative. And I think like that is such a
Yes.
superpower. Like I have a linear brain. My brain is just good old linear brain. Like I can't muster things the way that like people with nonlinear brain can. So like I'm always been
Yes.
in awe, right? But like, yeah,
Yeah.
going back to more and more in every area of your life, more and more of that like self
Yeah.
acceptance, grace, compassion as you go through
Mhm.
this process, right? Is there anything else that you want to share that you
Oh my
learned?
God. Yes, there is. Okay. So I also learned that I'm an empath. So I kind of always known it. I also was able, I just learned that, okay, I'm an empath. So really I need to be very careful with the kind of energies that I'm around. And it's not so black and white, and some people might be like, well, I don't understand that, but for me, I realize I pick up on emotions and ideas very quickly without understanding it. It's almost like osmosis. And so that was really important for me to then say, okay, who am I going to talk to about my journey because I know that their reactions really do affect me. I'm highly sensitive that way. So they're really going to affect me. So I actually, it's funny, I did this whole journey, this whole change, selling the clinic, getting into school without my family even knowing, because and a lot of people in my life had no idea, because that was a choice for me, that I love them and I respect their opinions, but I need to hear my own voice and listen and follow through before I allow the filtering of other people to come in. And that's not, some people, may not think that that's a good idea, but for me, that's what worked. And I was, the only people who knew were Vilma, my husband, and my best friend. That's it. No one else actually knew what I was deciding to go through and pursue. So that was huge, as those boundaries were really important as well. Um, so I also learned to put myself out there. I learned to ground a little bit better, and I learned to celebrate my little wins. I
Mm.
mentioned a couple of times how hard I was on myself. For me, even to get through a good week, I didn't celebrate it, or I would instead just I would just say, it's not important enough. I'm just gonna, it's not worth it. But celebrating the little wins, even like a little happy dance in my head, like you told me to start doing that. I completed a task. Yeah, Nikki, you got this. Like I used to tell that to myself in my head,
Yeah.
because it would help me see that it felt good to complete that. So
Mm.
those little things is how I was able to start moving out of the dentistry portion. And really, when we say dentistry, it's that whole lifestyle I was living, to start coming into, I'd say, more alignment. And you always remind me, Nikki, you're more in alignment now than you ever were before. And I always have that playing in my head. So that
Mm.
was another thing I learned. Another thing was the tools you taught me, including the app like Retrain Your Brain. Starting my day off with thoughts that, you put your own thoughts in there. Starting my day with thoughts I wanted to believe and listen to, that made a huge difference on on days that could have been really bad, but actually ended up being really good and very, very productive. So a couple of the wins there. I'm sure I have so many more, and they'll
Yeah.
keep coming up.
Yeah, 100%. And also for you, I think you were very receptive. Well, I mean, there were ups and downs as well, just like for all of us. I think in
Hmm.
general, just thought work and understanding just how much your narrative was affecting how you're feeling, which I
So
think that
much.
did not necessarily know before because you thought, we think thoughts just happen to us and they
Yeah.
do, but then we still have the power to actually change them or pause them, interrupt them, right? When I would be like, stand up to your inner bully, like, what would you say?
Yes.
Have that thought versus
Ex-
allow them to just take over. And then suddenly the next thing you know, you're down, you're doubting,
yeah.
and you're like, oh my God, I'm going crazy. This is never going to work.
And that was huge when the narrative in my head was, okay, so this was the narrative in my head for so long. I'm a doctor becoming a designer. Who the hell does that? And can you imagine? Like, I always thought that in my head. And the way I would tell people in the beginning was like, oh, what are you going to do? Well, I'm going to do this. And I'd put myself down when I was first talking about it. And that was the narrative in my head that, oh my God, who the hell does that? Who goes through years of education, going 16 years in one industry and moves on to another? And I almost projected other people's, what I thought their responses would be. That became my story. So when I finally told everyone in my life what was going on, they were so receptive. And I was so shocked, because my narrative was, well, as a woman in society who's a doctor, you don't do this kind of thing, right? And I led with that. And so I realized how important my narrative plays in my feelings. And I actually didn't take a lot of action. Like I would think that, and say I had to get ready to do something in New York or whatever it was, I wouldn't do it, because I was like, well, who the hell does that? And
Yeah.
that narrative that I'd been playing, when I finally saw it for what it was, and I was proven wrong, it was like the sense of freedom. That was like, really, your thoughts really do play, how you live out your life. So that was massive for me as well.
Yeah. And how much action you take, right? Because like if you have the
Hmm.
thought, who the hell does that? Like people will laugh. And it had like what you learned
Hmm.
then the hard way or the good way. I don't know. It's like this was only the projections that you had and the thoughts you had about
Exactly. About
yourself.
myself.
It has
About myself.
nothing to do with anyone else, right? And because, and
Hmm.
I remember when you told me, you're like, oh, we told like this, we went for dinner and we told this couple, and then I just made this little jokes about it, and they were really
Yes.
supportive. And I was like, why are you joking about this? And you go like, I don't
Yes.
know. It's just like, it's almost like you wanted to like
explain it to myself.
explaining to
Yes.
yourself, right? And be like, well, if I
Yeah.
kind of make fun of me first, then they can't
Then
do
they
it.
can't do it. It was my protection mechanism. And also I think there was a part of me, obviously there was a part of me that decided to pursue dentistry and that decided to pursue all these things within dentistry. And it was almost like I was appeasing that part of me to
Mm,
be able to then say, well, they're going to think this, and this is what I should say first. And so now I'm a little bit more conscientious about that. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, I'm a designer. It is what it is.
yeah.
Like, we're
Yeah.
not going into our past. It is, and the narrative of how I was explaining myself, it feels a lot better now, and I'm able to just be in a room and not judge myself.
100%. And I love that because what we are going through is that like identity shift through the process. This is
Mm-hmm.
exactly what it looks like. You kind of
Mm-hmm.
deciding in private, right? And be like, I'm doing this, but then still going through that flip-flopping of belief when you are
Mm-hmm.
surrounded by other people who know a different version of you. Right.
Exactly.
And then little by little starting to like strengthen that new identity of like, no, I'm doing this. Or like
Mm-hmm.
we would always say it was like, Nikki, this is happening. You're becoming a
Yes.
designer, right? But I want to
Yes.
talk about this because it's a little bit related to you being an empath. And I'm sure there are a lot of sensitive people in my audience as well, which even though, okay, so let me backtrack. I really want to share this as well, because again, I think this is just a learning point for many. When you came in, Ideas Bank, my clients know what Ideas Bank is where we
Mm-hmm.
deposit all the ideas of who and what we want to
Yes.
be and do and ever wanted to be and do. And I remember you had like a very long list of everything you wanted to do and then very long journals of like, and this, and I want to do e-commerce and I want to be the speaker and I want to and I want to this
The
and I was
writer, this, yeah.
right. And yeah, there's no shame. Like you are very ambitious, and I'm sure you're going to get there. Right. And I think the big piece for us when we started off was like really learning how to compartmentalize and be like, okay, let's choose
Mm-hmm.
the foundational piece, the one direction, and you can always add other things. And I remember at first you were a little resistant because even though it's so interesting, right? And that's why you kept on being stuck in the same loop because you were telling yourself that you are capable and want to have these big dreams coming true, but you couldn't
Mm-hmm.
take action yet. And for you to let go the idea that you may need to pause on these other things while you like work on
Mm-hmm.
design, you had a little bit of resistance and you're like, Vilma, but I can do everything, I promise you. Like, I
Yes.
can do it
I can
all.
do it. I can do it.
Right. So do you
Yeah.
remember anything about that? Because I think that's a very important point.
Oh, that poor girl. That's a lot of pressure to put on someone to be like, yeah, I want to play 25 roles right now. Because you know what it was that narrative, again, it's all about the narrative and the thought work. In my head, the next step had to be so big to then explain why I was leaving dentistry. That, okay, I'm going to be a this and a this and a this and a this, because then it's almost like a protection mechanism. And it was almost like the dream that I initially had, which was to go into design, wasn't big enough. And no one told me that. That was something I took on for myself.
Yeah.
So when I came in, it was almost like, well, I'm going to do this and that. And I catch myself still kind of going back like, well, maybe, instead of being an interior designer, I should go into fashion. I still catch myself, but I now have the tools to be like, no, no, no. We're happy here. Like, this works for me. I'm in alignment. I'm happy. This is a great step, because I don't know if it's my brain or just the way that I was thinking, that it just had to be that big. And
Mm,
so, and then by being that big, it led me to more chaos. And then I wasn't really able to actually take a step forward,
yeah.
which is what I was stuck in for 5 years before I came into the program with you.
Yeah. It's kind of like the grass is greener on the other side, right? So that's why I'm afraid
Mm-hmm.
to commit. And even, when we chose the design, well, you chose the design.
Mm-hmm.
I always say like I feel like I'm participating with everyone in this, but when we chose and we came to New York,
Yeah.
right? It was like you even then, because I want to share that with people, because a lot of the times people think, well, when I land on the right step, I'm just gonna have this like unprecedented like self-trust
Yes.
and like
It's gonna be
knowing that this
perfect.
yeah, it's gonna be perfect, and I'm never gonna lose faith, and I'm never gonna question that. You guys know, because that's not how the brain
No.
works, right? The
Oh my
survival
God.
mechanism, primal brain, is still gonna come to you and make you question things and test
Exactly.
you, right? Especially when you're misaligned, especially when you have so many shoes like Nikki had of like what she's supposed to be in
Mm-hmm.
society, otherwise she'll fail and everyone will hate her and so on
Yeah.
and so forth, right? Like even if you land on that path, please allow for those thoughts to come in. Just don't dance with them. Don't believe them, right? Because you know what it feels like when you're
Mm-hmm.
doing it, right? Let's talk a little bit about how you were really proactive in sourcing, because we talked about like test driving, right? I'm a big fan of
Mhm.
testing. And even you said yourself when you came in, you already had started speaking to people, right, in design.
Mhm.
And
Yep,
then those experiences, I feel like were so informative and gave you so much feedback about yourself and what you want and
yeah.
whether it's right. Share a little bit about those, whichever you want.
Definitely. So it was right before we started, like a year ago, right before that, the first 2 years in my clinic, I was solely focused on the clinic. Actually, before that, I had tried doing a tech company while I was running the business, and it killed me. It was not the right thing for me to do. It was really great, but well, while it lasted, but I came to you and I was like, you know what? I was in that moment. Do I want to be a fashion designer? Do I want to go into writing? Do I want to go into interior design? And so I already had some direction because I've been thinking about this for 20 years. And it was at that time where I came across this platform called Intro, which if anyone else can look into intro.co, and they have a lot of different creative experts on there, entrepreneurs, interior designers, a lot of different people. And so I saw that I could have a conversation with some top people in the field. And I said, you know what? It's a bit of an investment, but let me just talk to someone in the field because, their careers are very aligned with what it is that I think I want to do. And this is before we started our work. And so, as I think one of our first meetings, and I told you that, hey, I think I'm going to have this conversation, and you encouraged me. So I did that. And I had one conversation, and then I had a couple more. And each and every single conversation I had, and I just felt like I was talking to a colleague. And I was like, it felt like I was in the right place. What
Mm.
they were talking about, how they pursued their careers. It was like, yes, I can see myself in this role. And so I'd go on that high. And of course, I was balancing this out with the clinic. So then I'd be on this high and I'd be like, okay, well, from those conversations, they said, try getting an internship, try a shadowing experience. So I remember I had gotten a WeWork for me. I went to WeWork and I was like, I wrote my resume out and I said, okay, well, on my resume, I need to have an Instagram. How do they know my style? So I started an Instagram and I was then able to at least define what my style was. And every time I'd post, it was like this high, like this alignment high. Like, yes, this feels good. I'm going to do this. And I applied to a bunch of different shadowing and internship experiences. And obviously, nothing really came out of it until I had one conversation through Intro. And I bluntly asked the designer, Ryan, I said, Ryan, would you be okay if I came to shadow you? And he was like, honey, absolutely. Come shadow me in
Oh my
LA.
goodness, I love that.
And it took me a couple months to follow up on that. And again, because I would tell you, Vilma, well, it's really hard right now. We need to hire somebody. We need to do this. And those excuses kind of pushed me from pursuing it right away. And then somehow the conversation got started again with Ryan. And I was texting him. He's like, just come. I booked it for the summer. I think it was June or July of this year. And I went for a week and it was the best experience I've ever had because I was in a room full of people or studio full of people who also had career changes, who decided maybe to go to school or not to go to school. And the first 6 months of the year, the question for me was, okay, I'm going to do interior design, but do I go to school or do I not go to school? Should I try doing this on my own or do I really need to go to school? And so that was a huge battle in my head because it was constant. So a lot of the conversations I had were led with, do you think I need to go to school or can I follow you who maybe you did go to school or didn't? And so having these group of career changers in one studio over the summer and I'm looking at them and they're happy. Everyone's like, it's hard work. I'm happy and I love it. And I was like, yes, my body was like a hell yes, right? And some of them did go to school and some of them didn't. So I then looked at that and what I realized was that I was able to intern a little bit and help out, but I couldn't give the technical skills that I really like. I couldn't participate in that technicality of it, of actually designing something. I didn't know the language, I didn't know the programs, and I tried doing it on my own after that. And I realized, like, no, for me, I need to be in an environment where it's almost like a bubble and I need to learn about this from
Yeah.
other people. And that's just the way I learn. Like, maybe not
Yeah.
everyone needs to do that. There's plenty of designers out there who haven't had any education, they just did it on their own. And I realized on my own that I can't do that on my own. I'm just not wired that way. And so it was at that
Okay,
time
well,
where,
you know
yes,
what? No, you know what? Okay, okay, this is not a coaching session, but you know what? I think you know how where I stand. Actually, a lot of the times talk people out of going to school because I already think that they have what it takes, because
yes,
they have tenacity and love for it. But I think
yes,
with you, like we ended up arriving to like, okay, it makes sense for you to go to school because you are so like going back to even being an empath, you're so susceptible to your environments that I think
Yeah.
for you, like it's important to be immersed in that world, right? Talk about it, meet people
Hmm.
who are doing it, because that will then give you the momentum to go to the next step, whatever
Absolutely.
that will be, right? So for you,
Absolutely.
it made sense. But when I say I couldn't do it, I'm like, yeah, you could. You did it. You
I
helped your
could. Yes,
sister.
you're right.
Do you know what I
You
mean?
are
You
right.
could.
Okay, so I'm gonna just whatever Vilma said.
Yeah.
um, absolutely, you are right because obviously, to be in that environment for me was what was going to help me get to where I wanted to be, and I wanted to be in a city where I was surrounded by that all the time. I love Toronto. Toronto is not that city. New York City, well, yes. I mean, it just wasn't the place I could see myself because I did try to shadow with a lot of designers in Toronto. There's a lot more red tape there, and it's not so open to allowing outsiders who don't have the 4-year degree to come in, at least from what I found. Maybe other people find differently. And so going to school, but even before I decided fully to apply, do you remember that we tried doing that business? I tried to have
Yeah.
this business that I started, but which we still need to unpack whether it was my gremlins or whether it just wasn't in alignment. But I
Yeah.
tried doing a design business, but really the environment just wasn't,
Yeah.
it just wasn't there for me. And so coming to school, I can look back and be like, okay, I did the things, I sold the clinic, I finally found a place. It hasn't been super, super, super smooth. My emotions still are kind of all over the place. I'm still kind of freaking out, but I love it. That
Mm.
feeling of not being drained. Like when I go to class, I'm going there for 9 hours. I'm not coming back the way I used to, where I need to self-soothe and I need to
Yeah.
ignore the world and go on autopilot. It's a very different feeling now where it's like, okay, I'm
Mm.
tired. I need to go to bed. Like
Yeah,
that's,
tired, or I need to take care of my
yes,
physical body, right? But like I don't need to like
exactly.
disconnect to rest a little bit. And that is such a big
Exactly.
talk to me as well. So yeah, that piece. Okay, two things. I'm getting excited. One is like I really want to again like just emphasize that. So you would not, you who are listening to this would not have an illusion that is like always so easy, because like you literally Voxered me. So that's an app we use with the clients. You Voxered me before jumping on a plane to see Ryan, where you're like, Vilma, I don't think I'm gonna board the plane because I think I made the mistake. I shouldn't shadow anyone. Like you're freaking the F out, right?
Yeah.
Same happened before you came to New York, where you like literally
Yes.
came to the session and like point blank, you're like, Vilma, I think I'm making a mistake. And then
Yes.
I had to show you and remind you of who you are, what your
Yes.
brain is doing to you. That is very common. Like, it's okay.
Yes.
You're going exactly where you're supposed to go. Isn't that fun?
Um, yeah, is another pattern of mine that we saw because I mean, I'm making it sound like it wasn't as bad, but it was tough. It was
Yeah.
hard. There were days, honestly, before I even came to New York, I was crying for 6 days straight. Like,
Yeah.
let's be honest, like
Yeah.
it was a lot of emotions. So before I boarded the plane to LA, even though I had everything booked, and by the way, I procrastinated on booking because in my mind I was like, who goes in shadows at
Yeah.
the age, in their 30s? And that was another story playing. I didn't book the hotel or the flight until literally right before because I kept pushing it, even though I knew about this for so long. So that's really how those thoughts were taking over. But thankfully, you were reminding me, and I was like, Vilma, I don't think I can do this. This is not going to work. So I get to LA the first 2 days. I'm like, I don't know what on earth I'm doing here. I don't like this. I need to get out of here. And it wasn't until I went into the studio and I was like, no, no, I'm in the right spot. So then
Yeah.
that happened again when I came to visit the school in November. Vilma, I hate New York. I'm never gonna come here. Like this is dumb. Like I'm so
Yeah.
stupid. Why am I doing this? Like those thoughts were in my mind. And it almost happened, it started to happen again as I was actually coming to move here. And you reminded me, you're like, Nikki, this is a pattern of yours. Notice it. And as I did, I'm like, oh, this is my norm that I am very resistant to change. And
Yeah.
I want change so bad. And I want to
Yeah.
be the person of impact, but I am scared like there's no other. I'm so scared. And so that pattern is so strong. And so I do hope and I do feel that pattern may start to, get a little bit lighter and lighter as I am more aware of it. But maybe this happens again for the next
I
change
think
I
it
need to
will.
have.
It will. It's just a pattern
It
we
will.
have. It will, like, but at least you can recognize it now. You know, admit
Hmm.
and be like, well, I can breathe through it. I can expect for it. I can prepare
Yes.
myself for it. So I know exactly what I need to do, and I don't believe it. Right. So
Hmm.
because like I said, it's very common. Also, the bigger the change, bigger the resistance. Your narrative,
Hmm.
like I'm the dentist who is going into interior design.
Yes. Who
Does
does
that?
that?
Right. And
Yes.
that is why your story, I think, is that's why I'm so excited to have you on the podcast. And I was literally was telling Nikki, I was like, you need to come and talk to people and share your story because it's so powerful. It's so inspiring. Whenever I tell people about this change, right, they're like, oh my God, this is so amazing. This is so
Oh my
inspiring.
God. And
Right.
what's so crazy is that I was so embarrassed of it for so long that I had to have you remind me. I was like, well, what do people see that's so inspiring? Like it took a while for me to like look, and I'm still sometimes I still struggle with that where I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, did I do the right thing? And I have dentists in the family and I look at them, I'm like, hey, did I do the right thing? There's still moments like that even until yesterday where I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, but I have to then remind myself, how do I feel in this environment? Where do
Mm,
I see myself going? Like, let's connect to my higher self. This is the right thing? This is what she would do. And it feels great. And I made that decision on my own,
yeah.
right? It was me. I've pursued this. No one has influenced me. If anything, I've just been super supported by having the right people in my life and sharing that journey with them.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's like the whole journey, I think, you said it and other people say is just like career change is not just career change, it's a life change.
Mm-mm.
Like
It's a life.
everything life change. And then you going back to yourself is like every little step that you took,
Mhm.
you were going back to yourself or getting to know yourself, right? Because you didn't
Yeah.
know parts of you, like you didn't know what you're capable of, and you'd see glimpses of her and
Mhm.
you would love it, right?
Yeah.
And then she would slip away.
Yes. Yes. It was like this like flashing light and then it would just go away.
Yeah.
But that the work was for me to keep working on that because how many times did you tell me like the last year it was tough where it felt dark and I felt like I was in a really desperate position and you keep reminding me you have to cultivate the thoughts and beliefs that you are going to become a designer. It is
Yeah.
happening. You will sell your clinic because I think when you lose sight of that higher vision, every single bump feels like it's going to end your
Yeah.
life. And
Yeah.
so I was in that position for so long that to look up, and I would even forget to look up because I was in the weeds. You would have to remind me and help me, like, look up, remember where you're going, believe that it's going to happen because when you do that, you show up differently. If
Mm,
you're showing up out of desperation, it is true that energy that you give out, you're going to have more situations that make you feel more desperate. So constantly reminding myself, like, let go, look up, keep going. That was so important in that moment. And also, to have support in your life. If there's even one person that can look at you outside, firstly, work with Vilma, but even in your marriage or in your partnership, for me, I had a husband who felt the pain I felt and who reminded me that, we FaceTime last night and he tells me, he's like, I, he had tears in his eyes. I'm so happy I can finally see joy in what you're doing because for so many years you didn't have that. And to be here in this position where I look back and I just feel so bad for that girl who thought that she needed to play this role that was never not meant for her for a long time. It did serve a purpose. I learned so much. Really, that point in my life was a journey back to myself. Would I recommend it for anyone else to go through? If you can hear the whispers beforehand, no. Like
yeah.
believe in yourself, trust yourself. But if you're like me, do what you need to do, but be open to listening to yourself.
Yeah. And be open to listening to yourself, like learning how to trust yourself. That's a process.
Yes.
Another piece of surrendering, right? Because again, because of
Surrender.
your wanting to control and understand, and like that's a piece. Like I
Hmm.
don't know if you listen to the podcast with Nicole, because she talks about control a lot in the podcast. She was like, I just
Hmm.
needed to control, and for you as well.
Control
Like
it.
I
Yeah.
just need to control because then I feel safer because I come from environments where I don't feel safe when things are out of control. So
Hmm.
I'm going to
Yeah.
build a life around me where whether it's
Everything
perceived
can
a real
be.
control, I'm going to keep everything tight. So for you, letting go was a big, even with a sale, right? Like you would notice the
Hmm.
minute you let go and step away and tell your agent, don't message me, don't call me, don't give me any updates, right? It's okay. I'm going to surrender and trust the process. Talk
Yes,
to me about
because
that.
what was happening was, so to give more context, it took us over a year and a half to sell the clinic, and we went through multiple buyers. And what I did in the beginning was that I would tell her to call me and message me with every time she met with a buyer, and I wanted to know everything that was going on. And so that affected me to another level. Like that took me into a really deep, like dark place because it was almost like, no, the buyer said no. And then I was like, my whole world would be crushed. And I'd forget
Yeah.
that there was something outside of just that. And so I kept trying to clutch it and control it and be like, okay, I'm going to control this so I know how to manage myself around it. And I can still, put it in a pretty little bow somewhere and I can still deal with it. And that wasn't the case. because the more I controlled it, the more it affected her and the way that she was managing the sale as well. And I saw that. So when you were teaching me that there's a lesson here, and it was you, and I even went to a tarot card reader, and she's like, the same exact thing you said, Velma. She's like, you need to learn to let go. There's a lesson in this. You're not going to be able to sell the clinic until you learn the lesson. And the lesson was to surrender, let go, trust.
Mm.
That it sounds so simplistic. Oh yeah, surrender, let go. And like it's so like such a cliche thing to say. It's all over Instagram. But no, what does that actually mean? How do you actually get yourself out of the situation, get your mindset, get your energy out of that, and allow the situation to happen and circumstances to happen, and keep your head on your goal no matter what, when it feels like your world is falling apart every 5 minutes? That
Mm.
was a lesson I had to learn. And even till date, I think that's a lesson that's like the biggest lesson I still need to learn is allowing things without needing to control them.
Yeah.
So that to me, I see that I can see myself falling back into that if I don't find a way to manage my thoughts and be very, very aware of what's going on.
Yeah. And in order for you to manage your thoughts, you need to take care of yourself, even if it's a
Exactly.
conversation or a little walk, right? So like it's all very much connected. It's all one and the same.
Yeah.
Like I'm so proud of you. I'm listening to you. I'm like, A plus, A plus. You learned the lessons. You can
Listen,
graduate now.
I don't know if it's complete yet. I don't know if it's
No,
complete,
it's
but
never
there's still a
complete.
lot.
It's never complete, right? But it's
Because
like,
that's what I thought. I thought, okay, maybe other people think the same thing. I thought that this journey it was gonna be easy peasy. You're just
mm,
gonna someone's gonna come in, she's gonna assess me and tell me I need to become a designer, which I already know, and like that's it. I
yeah.
did not know this was gonna be a full life change. The way I showed up for my clinic and the way I showed up for who I was before versus who I am now, and how I can now be in fulfilling relationships. That's something that I didn't even know that was going to be an outcome of this, right? I had no idea it would affect me to that level where every part of my life can now be in a point where it supports each other instead of taking away from each other.
Ooh, that's
That
a good
was
point.
huge. That
Yeah.
was huge for me.
Yeah. 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 Love that.
Okay, you're
Okay.
so proud of your student, aren't you?
I'm so proud. I'm like, oh my goodness, I need to celebrate.
Such an Aries.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. No, I am proud. I mean, you went on the journey, and like I said, you're right, right? Like it's really important to emphasize. And I usually tell that to people who start working with me is like, and not just with me, any other coach or any
Mhm.
other transformational change is that yes, it's going to be fun. It's going to be a fun ride. You're going to go on the ups and you're going to have extreme lows
Mhm.
because you're changing everything, how you think, how you feel, how you relate, how you know yourself,
Yeah.
like how you regulate yourself. Like it's a complete shift because and the reason sometimes people ask me like why does it have to be so like big is because well you're going
Mhm.
back to your aligned path in order for you to be able to embody the energy of aligned path to shine the authentic light. It's not just you applying sending some resonance and applying to that job. You need to prepare for it, and the universe is doing
Yeah.
that with you, right? It's helping you prepare for that new version, new level that you are about to get on, and there are prerequisites for you to get there.
Exactly. It's like you have to prep your entire environment for that. And what does that
Yeah.
look like?
Yeah.
Are you eating correctly? Are you thinking, like, not thinking correctly, but are you managing your thoughts? Are you
Yeah.
deciding your narrative? Are you working with that? Because for so long, like I told you, I had that watching Oprah on the couch moment. I thought that it was okay, I'm just going to get the magic answer and a purpose is going to fall into my lap and then I'll just go with it.
Yeah.
None of that comes through until you're ready for it and on so many different levels of your life.
Yeah, 100%. And that's the reason why I had to go through what you went through in
Mhm.
order to be able to sit here, look at me from New York, studying design, right? Like really good. And you and I spoke about it. Like even now you have obstacles, but the way you look at the obstacles or relate to them is just like you believe that you can figure it out. Whereas in the past, you
Yes.
said it would be the end of the world every time you
It
had
was
an
end of the
obstacle.
world. Yes. I mean, and I'm not gonna lie, I had that moment. I was telling you as I was looking for housing. Housing in New York is not easy.
Mm,
And I had that moment where I was in my head just up until last week and I was like living in that chaos again, like, oh my God, oh my God. And it was consuming me. And
mm,
it wasn't until I looked outside of it and I'm like, no, I can figure this out. I have the answers. So that was so different because before if something went wrong, it would be 4 days of me self-soothing before I got out of that ready to come up with a solution. So
yeah.
that was really a very, very different from how I experienced it
Yeah.
before.
Yeah. self-soothing, right? With like eating,
Mhm.
Netflixing, and then shaming yourself for doing so. There's
Yes.
so many layers in that behavior.
Oh, yes. I can't forget about the self-shaming. Always shaming myself. Like, oh my God, I did it again. What am I
Yeah.
doing with my life? And it
Yeah.
had those moments for so many years. So yeah, you're right. Now it's more if I've had to self-soothe the last couple days because I'm not necessarily in my
Yeah.
place yet. And I'm okay with it. I'm like,
Yeah, but
I
that's
know what I'm
strategic.
doing.
Yeah,
It's
but
very
that's
strategic. Oh
yeah.
yeah. I'm like, I know what I'm doing. I know why I'm doing this. And I'm able to be compassionate towards myself, which to me, it before is very taboo. You're not compassionate to yourself. You're just doing the things, you're just doing the self-care, but true compassion and looking at where you are and be like, hey, it's fine. I'm okay. That to me has also been a huge gift.
Mm. Well,
Mhm.
I'm excited for you. And the reason why, because sometimes like even my clients or like, I don't know if you
Mhm.
ask me, but people will ask me like, well, am I allowed to come, I'm showing quotation marks. Am I allowed to come on a podcast because I'm not an established designer yet.
Mhm.
I don't have, design house and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like,
Yes.
well, of course. And that is that piece of like us celebrating the change. Cause I feel like you went through
Yes.
the hardest part. The rest of it is going to be when you're on a aligned path, the energy is pulling you in. You get tired, you get up next morning and you're like, okay, let me try again, let me figure out. Like it's a
Yeah.
different way, it's a different
It's
reality.
different. And you know what? I really wish I knew before was that I thought that being successful in this career change would be this like rainbows and butterflies moment where I'm like in sailing in the sunset and I'm a designer and I'm there. But I don't know where I got that from. Too many Disney movies as a kid, maybe. I don't know. But what I realized, and I've said this to you, is that okay, so success is saying yes to myself.
Mm,
However small that looks, like success for me was waking up in the morning and saying, you know what? Yes, I'm going to do a podcast. I'm not where I want to be. I don't have the societal success yet that I have the money and the cars and all of that. You could say extra stuff. But the fact that I woke up and I'm doing something that I love and I'm in a moment, it's a little messy. It's not clean. It's fine. That is success. And I wish we
yes.
celebrated that more than what Instagram and TikTok tells you to celebrate, right? Or what the world tells you to celebrate. Oh, yeah, traditional stories in my head, I thought, okay, well, they're not going to believe I'm successful until I have all the things. That's
Mm,
not true. I'm waking up, there's joy on my face. I'm happy to take the day on. I'm excited to be here and I can just take on whatever comes my way.
yeah.
That's success.
That's success, especially because you need to
Mhm.
look back and compare yourself to yourself, right? Not to other successful designers, which we do when we come into a new field. No,
Oh
I
yeah.
need to look back at the Nikki a year ago who was like crying herself to sleep or whatever you did,
Yes.
right? Like those two versions are very different. That is
Yeah.
success. And that is
Yeah.
going to be a continuous journey. There's no end to this.
Exactly. Exactly. I
Yeah.
mean, I've taken one step towards what I consider my dream life, and I'm not daydreaming about that life anymore. I'm living it,
Mm.
right? So
Yeah.
it doesn't come, I know it doesn't come like it's so easy and exactly what I said, but we're getting there. And if I decide to make another pivot from here, it's because I'm saying yes to myself,
Yeah.
right? That's gonna, like you said to me, so the journey doesn't end. So it's just taking it one step at a time towards a life that I really do feel is in alignment with me.
Yes, amen. Oh, this is a perfect place to finish. But I need to ask you one more question. So many
Okay.
times you listen to other podcasts. So, like, what is the advice that you give to other people who are you a year ago or to
Hmm.
yourself, right? What
Yeah.
would you tell them? What would you
Okay.
would have wanted to hear?
So I think what I would wanted to hear is actually what I just mentioned is about the fact that a journey like this is not linear and it's not supposed to be linear. Like stop looking at for me, had to learn to stop looking at accounts that told me it should be linear. It's not linear, but I think it's all about learning to trust yourself and just knowing that when you hear a whisper, go for it. Right. It's kind of like what Oprah says. I keep mentioning Oprah because she really, like, that's all I really listened to in the beginning. But if you have a sense of something is not right, believe it. Don't let it come to a point where it affects your health. It affected my health, not listening to myself. It affected my mindset, affected my well being. And now I'm on that journey to come back to my health because for so long I didn't listen to myself. So if you have that feeling, just sit with it. Or if you don't feel the feels yet, but you can tell something's off, learn about yourself. Learn who you are, learn what you like, and see, where you want to be in life. Sit with that. Your future self, is that in alignment with where you are today? So had I listened to that, I think I would have maybe come to you had I found you 6 years earlier. I've known for years. This was not an overnight decision for me. It took a long time to get here. So that's one thing. Another thing is just to emphasize that saying yes to yourself is success, because I'm coming from a world where, as a professional, like so many other people, you are taught what success means. That is not true. It is not true. I've met people who are quote unquote success, and they're not happy and they're not fulfilled, and they're looking to soothe themselves with alcohol, and they're doing whiskey on weekends. Like they're not happy. So really you need to ask yourself, like, am I okay to say yes to walk away from something or to work my way towards something else other than where I am today? And I also wish that, another thing that I'm going to kind of go into the relationships is that when you're not in alignment, it affects your family and it affects your spouse. So that's one huge thing. It wasn't until, my husband and I have a really good relationship, and he was able to tell me that, when you weren't, when it was affecting you, it was affecting me. And when I hear that, I'm like, wow. And I decided to be in that position for so many years because, of course, I didn't have the tools, but I was in that position and it affected him too. I think when you see that, it really makes an impact, and you have to start thinking a little bit differently. You have to be a little selfish and be like, you know what? It's time for me to take care of myself. It's time for me to do this for me. And it starts from there.
Mm, these are such good. This is such good advice. I love that. It's so true. And another piece, I think, with you as well, kind of just looking at your journey, I think also a reminder to people to like read the symptoms. A lot of the
Yeah.
times when we are sick, when we are tired, and it doesn't even make sense, when we have mystery
Mhm.
symptoms, when we feel off, it's not accidental. It's all
No.
symptoms showing you that something is off. Your body does not just randomly start aching or getting tired. There is a leak of energy, and that is all working for you, reminding you that something is off. There's something
Yes.
to be looked at versus us popping pills. And like this is a
Or
culture we live in.
alcohol. Or
Alcohol.
you know what? The drinking alcohol every night for me, like when I started doing that for a while, and I'm like, why? Why am I doing this? And it
Yes.
was to forget about my day. And that to me is, how do you want to live a life where you're not even remembering half your day, or where you're trying to, it's what, like 60% of your life or 50% of your life you're working? I don't know the statistics, but why do you want that 50% of your one life that you've been given to make you feel like you need to forget about it or self-soothe yourself?
Uh, 100%. Because it's not accidental, right? Because like
Mhm.
what you said is normalized these days. Like everyone hates their
Yes.
job. Oh, come on. Like when I got into banking and there's like, oh, Vilma, don't be ridiculous. Everyone hates banking. We are just here like, because that's what adults do. And I'm
Yeah.
like, but I'm so unhappy. Like what?
Yeah.
Like, why are you all on drugs and alcohol,
This is
right? Like
not
trying to
okay.
survive and disconnect. So if you have those symptoms, don't wait for, say, what happened to me, because my change was dramatic, or to Nikki, right? Like you can start earlier. You don't have to go through like physical pain and be completely fatigued and
Mhm.
burnt out and then wanting to change career. You can still do that, but it's going to be much harder for you because you need to get to that optimal state first before we
Yeah.
can build the change on top of that.
And you know what? And even if you haven't heard the symptoms, still be compassionate towards yourself.
Yeah.
Like if you're lucky enough to have those symptoms and actually listen, that's amazing. And if you're not, and say you're in your 50s, 60s, 70s, and you're like, something in my life just, it didn't feel like I lived my life to the fullest, that's your symptom. Change your
Yeah.
life. You can still change it. There are
Yeah.
people who do career changes even in their 70s.
Yeah.
And I think we need to normalize that it doesn't matter if it's taken you a long, windy road and you finally got here, but just do it. Do it for yourself, because you really never know who you've inspired. There are people that come up to me now and they tell me, I've been so unhappy as a lawyer or as an accountant, and this is inspiring me. I want to do something with my life too.
Mm,
That to me, like, oh, I'm getting like the feelings now.
yeah.
That to me is huge. And I didn't mean to do that because, for me, I was, quote unquote, struggling silently. but it really does make an impact. And now I think when I look at the future generations coming in, my nieces and my nephews, I want them to have an example in me that, you know what, it doesn't matter that she already had a career. She was in her 30s. She was already married. She should have checked all the societal boxes, but she still decided to have a change. And right now, I don't know what that looks like, but she said yes to herself. And that should be more than enough.
Yeah. Amen. Amen. Love this. Oh my goodness. You should be a
Oh,
regular. We should have like a little
I would
segment.
love that. I would love that. You're inspiring me right now.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your story, Nikki. I know that it's going to be so inspiring. People just love
Thank
it. I don't know
you.
what it is. Maybe it's just I was thinking about it too. Maybe it's just a drastic change of like from being a doctor to going into something creative. People just
Mhm.
don't like it doesn't connect,
It's
right?
not, well, it's not really heard of either. And only when it's so funny, side note, it's only when I got into the school that I realized that some of my professors were taught by career changers, one
Wow.
of whom was a physician that went into interior design. So
Wow.
people do it, but it's not talked about and it's not normalized. So I think one of my personal missions is going to be to normalize that. It
Yeah.
doesn't matter how old you are. I want everyone to feel like they're in a fulfilling part of their life,
I
not
know that's
so
exactly how I
unsuccessful.
feel. I want to shake
Yeah.
everyone who's unhappy at work and be like, do you know you can change it? You are not a tree. You can move.
Yes. But you know what? We've been taught to be trees, and we've been
Yeah.
taught that once you plant the seeds, you stay there and you grow what you need to grow, and then you give the leaves and you live the life and day in and day out. But that doesn't feel good. Be the wind. Be okay with
Yeah.
change.
Yeah.
It's okay. And it just takes, and I say that because I've struggled with change. You know that. I'm still struggling with change. But once you do it, you're like, wow, there actually is another way to live my life. And I
Yeah.
didn't believe that was possible for so long.
Yeah. So it's possible, you guys. Make a change.
Mhm.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Nikki, for your time. Thank you for sharing your
Thank you.
story. I know it's going to be so useful. We'll continue coaching. I'll see you in the coaching
Yes.
session. And I'm saying bye to the listeners. Speak to you soon.
Bye.
Thank you for spending time with me today. If you resonate with this content, please subscribe and leave a little review to put a smile on my face. And if you'd like to take this work further and have my one-on-one support in switching to an aligned career path using my holistic career change method, make sure you head over to the show notes and book your free consultation call. I can't wait to meet you. Have a nice day.